All right, welcome everyone to this exciting webinar about creativity, how to discover it and develop it. And I'm here today with Cindy Stone, like last time, and she is an author, so she has written already a book, she's publishing another book, she has written a screenplay, she's a psychotherapist, so she has a wealth of background knowledge about creativity in different areas. And so I will hand over to you, Cindy, to see how you will get started with this. But before we do, just to let you know, you can post the questions in the box below anytime. And at the end, we'll go back and we actually look at it and we'll answer as many questions as we can before we wrap it up. So, over to you, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Joachim. And thank you all for joining us. This is a topic that is really close to my heart, and it's so incredibly rich that I get very excited to talk about it. But before we even begin, before we say anything, really do anything, before we learn any new interesting skills, and before we really discover just how deep and unlimited each of our creative reservoirs are, as there is no more natural process, other than perhaps eating and sleeping, that is as natural to us as creating. So let's begin with the quiet, the reverence that the state of creativity really deserves. So let's start with creating the space that our unconscious minds need to really begin to engage with us. We all have thoughts that are consciously created, like when we reach for a pen, thoughts that are spontaneously arise, like, oh, I'm hungry. We have thoughts that surprise us, we have thoughts that delight us, we have all kinds of thoughts, and we all have thoughts. So go ahead for just a moment. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. I imagine that you're all in the privacy of your own home and in a nice, comfortable chair. Close your eyes if you wish, and really turn your thoughts inwards. Turn your attention inside. Allow your breathing to relax and go even. Go ahead, travel all the way inside. All the way inside where your thoughts arise. And see if you can find that place. The instant, that fleeting moment where a thought begins to form. It might be like the moment a flame flickers into life. Or it could be something almost impossible to see, like a seed that's deep underneath the ground. And as the earth warms and receives nutrients, that seed begins to open up and grow, reaching up until it bursts into the light. Or it could be like looking up into a cloudless sky, like I have here today. An endless blue sky reaching out in front of us, and then off in the periphery, a little wisp of a cloud beginning to develop, starting to float by. If we see or hear something, like a bird calling or a telephone ringing, instead of allowing that sound to pull us out of our internal space that we're now creating, maybe that will trigger a pleasant idea that leaps into our heads and gives us a wonderful array of associations that we can learn and grow from. We all have thoughts. They are our moment-to-moment creations that arise easily and effortlessly. Each thought, our unique creation. As unique as our fingerprints or our irises. Our unique creations that we create moment to moment, easily and effortlessly. And I just want to give us maybe 10, 20 seconds of silence to just really allow that space to grow and develop inside us. That space where the conscious mind stills and the unconscious mind is able to be heard. I'm going to be quiet now for just a couple of seconds and allow that space to emerge naturally. Okay. Of course, in an ideal world, we would leave that time for much, much longer. But since we're on an internet call, I don't want to leave us alone for too long. But what I really want you to get from that is that to really connect to your creativity, we need to create that time of contemplation. It's a place where we can get away from the hustle and bustle of the everyday life, and hey, let's face it, our lives get busier and busier, more and more complex, sometimes more and more stressful. They're just like, we have a really busy world right now. And creativity requires space. The space between thoughts. We need that time of quiet contemplation. We need to be able to dive deep underneath. Because when our conscious mind is chattering, we don't really get a chance to really hear, to really engage in a growing conversation or a growing dialogue or a growing relationship with our unconscious. And that's what I really, really want to stress, is become creative, or to grow your creativity, or to find your creativity, because we all have it. We really need that quiet space of contemplation that is hard to get for us in this time of busy lives. That's where the new ideas grow, where our natural curiosity is generated, where questions emerge naturally, easily and effortlessly. And that's where we need to get to in order to really create that place where new ideas emerge. I can't really tell you how many people have told me over the years, I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. And guess what? They were just incredibly creative. Every time you say a sentence or write an email, you are putting together words that have never existed before in that particular sequence. Creativity is the most natural thing we have. Every time a thought arises, that's creativity. Every time we think of a question, that's being creative. Now, sure, there are some people who are more creative than others. Some people who put together sentences that are very poetic. Some people who ask a question that is like really deep and penetrating, and somebody else will ask a very simple question. Sometimes the simpler, the more elegant, as Einstein would say. But yeah, it's clear that some people, seem to be more creative than others. Can we all be an Einstein? Can we all be a Picasso or a Dostoevsky? Or a Karsh? All of these very famous creative people. Can we all be like that? Well, I really believe we can be. I really believe that creativity is the most natural process we have. What's different for those people is they've probably done a lot of crafting. They've probably done a lot of study or a lot of, and they have a lot of interest and focus on their particular area. And so that allows them to use their creativity in perhaps a more defined way. Each and every one of us dreams. There is no one that doesn't dream. Now, there's lots of people who don't remember their dreams, but they actually do dream. We dream, anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 times a night. And I'm sure at some point you can remember at least 1 or 2 of your dreams over your life, or you've at least heard somebody else talk about their dreams. And what's the nature of dreams? And why would I be talking about it in terms of creativity? Well, dreams, I think, is one of the greatest expressions of just how amazingly creative we are. We're no longer constrained by the conscious mind of our daily life, of our waking life. We're no longer constrained by the physics of our waking life, so the physics of time and space. All of that changes. And when we have those constraints fall away, what do we get? We get these amazing jumbles of ideas and stories and people and things coming together where time doesn't stop us and where space doesn't get in our way. And everything comes together in new and fascinating and novel ways. This is what I really want you guys to really understand, is that we are all so incredibly naturally creative. Now, most people will talk about children as being naturally creative because they haven't been ruined yet. And that's true. You can see a greater degree of creativity in children during our waking life than you can see in most adults. And that is because they haven't been ruined yet. But we all dream, and we all dream in this incredibly symbolic and metaphoric language, which is the language of creativity and the language of books, the language of stories, the language of paintings, the language of photographs. These are the things that touch us and reach us, the language of emotions.
Cindy, may I pause you real quick there?
Yes.
Like you have said something I think absolutely crucially important, that we all have this creativity, and basically in every moment we create something and we just don't recognize it. And also with the children, that they have this creativity naturally. Is it just because they don't analyze and they don't criticize? It's like, oh, this is creative, or this is not creative, or something like that. Or why do you think is that?
Oh, absolutely. Children are more creative because they haven't been ruined yet, and for all of the reasons that you just said. We don't have, as children, we don't have the restrictions on our minds yet. We're not judging what we're doing yet. We haven't had a lot of people say, "Oh, you've done that wrong," yet. I mean, that will come. Because unfortunately, that's what we all experience during school. Unless we've gone to an amazing school, most of us experience this growing constriction that happens upon us, where we become more and more self-aware, and not necessarily in a good way.
Okay.
And we become more critical of what we do.
Yeah, okay. So basically, it is also probably one topic that you're going to move to, how to actually put that away that is constraining you.
Absolutely. This is all going to come, and what I plan to do is just like paint a very complete picture of what creativity is, and then what happens to shut it down in us, and give us a few ways. Of course, like I said, this is a hugely rich topic. Just give us a few ways that we can learn how to release a little bit more of this creativity. And then once we get all this creativity happening, then in order to become an artist, which is something different, there's a whole crafting process, a whole perfecting process, a kind of dual creation and crafting that has to happen to really create an artistic work. But crafting is another time. that's when you have to learn some other skills. But they're all really, that stuff is really learnable. That's just a matter of if you have the intention to learn it, you can learn it.
Perfect. Perfect. Go on.
Okay, so as you've just noticed, that there are things that enhance creativity, which is that kind of freedom that we all long for, and there are things that hinder creativity. And I'm going to do a really, really quick little exercise. If you need a pen and paper, you can use it, but you're only going to have to remember 3 words, so you probably don't need anything at all. This is so simple. No need to feel any anxiety whatsoever. There's no right or wrong answer. It's like the simplest exercise. And I don't want anybody to feel any stress at all, because stress is the worst, hindrance to creativity there is. As soon as one puts the sense of pressure on the self, then the creativity goes, oh, pressure, bye-bye, I'm going away for now. Don't want to be here. And it goes away. So let's do a quick and simple exercise. I'm going to say 3 words, and just pick a word that jumps to mind first. So just try to pick the first one. So the first word is color. Pick a word. Second word is furniture. And the third word is flower. Flower.
Ah, flower, okay.
Flower, yeah. Okay, so for the first word, color, I will have no idea how many people have chosen this word, but I imagine some people will recognize when I say, how many people chose red as a color? And how many people chose blue as a color? And how many people chose something else? Now for furniture, how many people was their first thought chair? How many people thought couch? And how many people thought another word? And now for flower. How many people was the first thought they had for flower a rose? How many people was it a daisy? And how many people had another flower? So now why am I asking this question? Why might it be important? We here in the West really put a high, strong value on individuality and uniqueness. And we pride ourselves on this ability. Yet in any group, anywhere, at least in North America, certainly in Britain, this is true. I'm not sure for Europe. You might have a few different things that come to mind. But in those 3, in North America, Canada, US, Britain, in any group, the majority will answer red for color, or blue. And for furniture, most will answer chair, and the second most used answer is couch. And for flower, most people will answer rose, and then they'll answer daisy. And so what does that really mean? And what does it mean if you had an answer outside of those 3? And we're talking also now about the first thing that jumps into your mind, not if you go, oh, I think rose, I don't want to think rose, okay, let's think daffodil. That's another step in this, but it's an important step if you did that. Most people chose red or blue for a color, particularly in North America and Britain. Our flags, if you've noticed, they all have red, they all have blue. They're very powerful colors. They're two of the primary colors. We choose the things that jump into our mind the quickest because they're like an automatic response. Color red, color blue. We're sitting in a chair, so it's probably the first thing that's going to jump in our minds. Why not bed? But we're sitting in a chair. When we sit in a chair, what's the next thing that's usually beside it is a couch. And same with flowers. We mostly think of roses or daisies. These are kind of our automatic responses. And what does that mean? It means that our minds are beginning to create grooves and ruts. Our minds are actually going on an automatic little search of neural networks that are very well established. We need some automation in our lives and in our minds. Otherwise, things would take too long to do. If we always had to wait for a spontaneously new, brand new idea to jump into our minds all the time, some things would take too long, like, oh my God, a car is about to come and hit us. We better leap. Our minds already know how to make our bodies move very quickly, so we leap. So that automation device is really necessary. But what happens is, all too often, society has a lot more power than we think it does. And we begin to think in these really automatic responses. And we begin to think like everybody else does. And sometimes that's really good. Sometimes we need a consensus of things. But sometimes we need to pay attention to when we're falling into automatic responses and begin to move out of our grooves and ruts. Because it's not being creative when we fall into a groove and rut. It's the antithesis of being creative. So, what happens when we start just really falling into a habitual way of doing things? We fall into a groove and rut, and we get less and less novel ideas bubbling up spontaneously. So, what this means is that mental flexibility is a really vital nutrition to creativity. So how does one create mental flexibility? So let's just look at the opposite of mental flexibility, which is mental inflexibility. And we've all gotten it at times. A moment where suddenly your mind just can't shift into the next gear, and you're so sure that you're right, and somebody else will be complaining to you and say, no, it's not that way, it's this way, and you go, no, you're not listening to me, it's this way. I remember clearly several times just getting into this like mentally inflexible loop with something, and I couldn't see out of it. And when you're inside that loop, you can't notice it. All you can see is, I'm not being heard, I'm not being listened to. But outside, people can see that you're being in a mentally inflexible loop. You can see it. You are insistent on your own way. You can't see any other idea. You can't see past what you're thinking. This is the way to notice mental inflexibility. It's actually very easy to see from the outside. So, now that we've identified mental inflexibility, and I'm sure that if you really think about it, you can all think of a moment where you've been mentally inflexible. I have a situation quite a while ago, but I was in a grocery store and somebody gave me a bill and I was distracted. And I looked at the bill and I looked at the change that she gave me and I was sure it was incorrect. And she said, no, I gave you the right amount. And I'm like, no, look, here's the bill, blah, 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 this is what, and she goes, no, look. And then finally it all sunk in. I was like, oh my God, you are so right. I'm so sorry. And I'm sure if we think about it, we all have times like that where we just get that mental inflexibility. We can't see beyond what we think is right. So how do we exercise our mental flexibility? We know how to do it with our bodies, right? We'll do something like yoga. We'll martial arts, stretching, Pilates, So we really understand the importance of making our bodies flexible. How do we make our minds flexible? Okay, well, there's a ton of ways. And one way is combining, like this is just an exercise. It's not something that that you would, automatically do. I've got some exercises at the end that will continue this flexibility of the mind that are simple. But this one is like a real exercise that I want you to take part in at the moment. And I call it combining words or random words. And it's just it's almost fun thing to do. You can do it with somebody else. And you take two random words, put them together, and see what you can create with it. So two random words that might not normally come together. Let's say tree and shirt. And then you start thinking about a tree. And what are the qualities of a tree? Well, a tree is natural. A tree is made of wood. Furniture is made from wood. Okay, a shirt. Well, a shirt can be made of natural fibers. Could be made of cotton. Could be made of not natural fibers. Could you make a piece of furniture with a shirt? I don't think so. Oh, wait a minute. You could shellac a shirt with that sticky stuff that comes from trees, and you could harden it and you could make it into a chair back. Hey, you can make a shirt into a tree. Could you make a tree into a shirt? Well, maybe that's how bamboo fibers were created. Somebody just put these two ideas together and like, whoa, now we have bamboo fibers.
So Cindy, if I understand correctly, just to clarify with the exercise, so basically, if I would do it with someone, I would just give one random word and the other person gives another random word, and try to see how can you combine it in some way that makes sense. Is that right? Or just any way?
In some way, well, I think that it has to make a little bit of sense. Otherwise, it's just a random exercise of putting random things together. But what you want to do is see just how creative you can get with these. So you can take it like another step. So shirt and tree. Okay, trees, you can make weapons out of trees. You can make spears. You can make arrows. Can you make a weapon out of a shirt? Think about it, can you?
Well, maybe if you roll it up so it's a little pointy and you harden it in some way, it can turn out into something, or you can flick it, like the towel. I've never tried it with a shirt, so I don't know.
Exactly. You could flick it. You could wrap the sleeves around somebody's neck. Maybe that's how they got the idea of straitjackets.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Defend ourselves. So make the sleeves a little longer and wrap the arms around and secure them, and then we're protected. A defensive stuff. So like, this is what I mean. So just kind of taking two random items, putting them together, and looking at the qualities of that one and looking at the qualities of this one, and seeing just how many interesting things you can put together. I mean, we've only come up with things that have already been created. But I'm sure when I first said tree and shirt, you weren't thinking about, okay, how can you make a shirt something that could defend you? So
okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just really the idea, is to take random words, and what it does is it takes lateral thinking and it begins to shift lateral thinking into a great many different ways, and sometimes really novel ideas come out of this. And it's really just an exercise to begin to take your mind from the normal, from the way you usually think at something, and thinking about it in a very different way.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
And
It
that's
reminds me of this thing I heard. There was like this company who did like purses or something like that with leather, and
yeah.
they were kind of failing. I don't know, the market has changed or something like that. And they were having a meeting. One guy was like, I don't know what we should do with this, but my dog has chewed up the the bag. He always chews up this bag. And so in the end, they actually ended up doing high quality toys for dogs.
That's the idea. Really seeing things with fresh eyes. And again, I want to go back to that moment of allowing the space in the mind so that these new ideas can bubble up and emerge naturally. But I think that you get the idea of how mental flexibility is really key to creativity, and that there are some ways that we can practice developing that flexibility. And of course, just to make it clear too, you asked this earlier about how do we get and what happens to children when they lose that creativity. Education, teachers, parents, society at large, everything is kind of conspiring against developing creativity. Not necessarily on purpose, but there are things that we need to learn that if we learn them too well, they start to inhibit creativity. Which brings me to the next point, which is the critical voices inside our minds. It is the #1 enemy of creativity, I believe. It's that hyper-consciousness. It's that voice that pops up and says, you can't do that. What's the point of trying? Oh, that's too hard for you. Somebody else could do that better. All of these voices, I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, can really relate to having a highly critical voice inside. Perfectionists often have hugely overdeveloped critical voices. Now, the critical voice, again, is just like the automated responses. There is a reason for it. We do need to have the critical voices. We need to have a critical ability to allow us to decide, do we like this? Do we like this? Is this good for us? Is this not good for us? Have we done enough work on this? Is this a finished product? Does it need more development? All of these things require critical thinking skills. When we watch a newscast on TV, do we just take it all as if they're telling us every bit of truth? Or do we need to engage a critical faculty and ask critical questions? Is this the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Or is this, something that we need to question a little bit more? Is something more going on behind this? So that's why the critical faculty is really, really important. However, what happens to many of us is this critical voice, instead of paying attention to all of that stuff, it just focuses all of its intent on the self. And it says, you can't do it, it's no use in trying, you've never done it right before, what makes you think you can do this, who do you think you are? All of these kinds of critical voices come into play, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more we practice that. And when these two things occur, when we have the critical voice and it's been going on for too long, what happens then is you'll often find people feeling a slight to extreme depression, a slight to extreme hopelessness, a slight to extreme loss of energy. Because the body and the mind is engaged in this war with the self. You want to do something and it's saying, no, you can't. You want to do something and it's telling you all the reasons why you're no good for it. Can you imagine for a moment, and I really want you to think about this, can you imagine for a moment just how much energy would be released if instead of your mind engaging and telling you all of the ways, it has so many creative ways of telling you how you can't do this. If instead your mind began to help you create, to help you do in a very loving way, that would be life-changing. That would be a release of incredible amounts of energy, because it takes a lot of energy to do this to your mind.
Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. That's a really crucial point.
Yes. So, critical voices has always been a specialty of mine with people in my practice, and it's a huge topic, and it can take a little time to a long time to unwrap all of this stuff. But I'm going to give you just a couple of little things, maybe about 2 or 3 little things that you can do now to actually help yourself with those critical voices. And if it's something that you find that you've suffered from, therapists can really, really help with this stuff. They can help to unwrap it. They can help to tease apart the critical thoughts from the emotions. So if you have critical thoughts that happen, I want you to just take a moment before the critical thought crystallizes in your mind, or the voice, and think about what happens the moment before that. For some people, those moments are so tied up, they can't find the moment before the critical thought arises. And for some people, the critical voice is so far just under the surface of awareness. They're not even aware that the critical voices are there. They just know them and feel them, and they're not hearing them. That's when you get a lot of hopelessness and a lot of depression. So what do you have to do? It takes a little bit of practice to begin to pay attention to the thoughts that are just underneath awareness and begin to start to pull them up. And what you normally find is when you're feeling like a little lack of energy, a little bit of depression, and a little bit of hopelessness, what you generally find is some critical voice that's been active, whether you're aware of it or not. So as you allow and just kind of look into that, you can pull those critical voices up and see them. And one of the things that I used to do when I first started writing was I would take a piece of paper and put it to the side. And I would first write all of the things my critical voices were saying. You can't do this, you're not a good writer, you don't know how to do this, there's no point in even trying. And I'd write them all out and then put it to the side. And then I'd start writing because I had some temporary relief from it. Once you get these critical voices out and you can hear them and you know what they're about, you can see how much energy is taken up. And you can see actually how creative they are, because they're endlessly creative at telling you why you can't do something. Imagine how much creative energy and creative juice you're going to get when you stop paying attention to those critical voices. And yes.
Yeah, that's. I just want to say it's really true, and sometimes because they are so unaware. So as you said, when you start to pull them up, you actually start to realize, wait a second, what am I doing to myself?
Yes.
That's I can all see. When you go to a hypnotist or a therapist, or whatever, it really helps because you suddenly become aware that what you're doing to yourself, and so that will naturally put the awareness and also start to alter the whole process.
And a really good exercise for that you can just even think of right now, and it'll change everything, is just imagine for a moment someone or something you really, 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 really love. It can be your partner, it can be a pet, It can be a relative, a friend, someone, something that you really, really love. Can you imagine saying those things to them? How inspiring would they be? You know, how inspired would they be if you treated them that way? How capable would they be to achieve anything if you said those things to them? That kind of like, oh wow, you know, it seems obvious once you think about it, but for many people who hadn't even thought of what that would sound like if you said that to somebody else. It's really, that is the most freeing moment ever. That that moment of realization can completely lift your spirit and free your creativity. Wonderful. So there's like a million aspects of how to exorcise the critical voice, and it really, it's been something that troubled me for most of my life. So like that's why I unfortunately know so many exercises on how to get rid of it, and it still plagues me. It's still something that I have to work on and and free up and release. But it is life-changing when you begin to really understand just how inhibiting the critical voices can be. So in the meantime, what I want to get to next is back to the naturalness of creativity. And when you really get in touch with just how natural creativity can be, some of this other stuff just doesn't even matter. You can just then allow your ideas to begin to blossom, and you can do whatever it is, your art that you want to do, whether it's writing, whether it's painting, whether it's photography, whether it's knitting, putting together new patterns, working in organizations, in building better teams, martial arts. All of these things require a spontaneity and a creativity. So what I like to do is to go into the things that we do the most naturally. So can you imagine what that might be?
No.
Yes, you can. But anyway, I'm going to tell you because I don't want to put you on the spot. It's dreaming. And so what I want to do is just give you guys a couple of really simple exercises that will develop your ability to dream. Because even though we all dream, some people say they don't. Like my sister, she always says, I don't dream. I never dream. You always have dreams. I never have dreams. And I say to her, you know, you just have to stop saying you don't dream. And you have to start saying, I dream, and I really want to remember my dreams. Because even though we're kind of talking about our unconscious right now as if it's almost like a separate entity, if we're saying to our unconscious, oh, I never dream, our unconscious says, oh, okay, well, I guess that's not important to you, so I just won't give you those dreams. And I'll just keep them, you know, I mean, we'll dream at night, and then I'll just keep them, and you won't have to remember them because that's not something you want. And what creativity is a joining of the conscious and the unconscious mind in a way that allows the conscious mind to freely communicate with us. So we want to engage with our unconscious mind as if it's something that needs to be respected. That's why we need to give it that respectful time. That's why we need to communicate with it and say, I want to remember my dreams. Please help me remember my dreams. And then what we can do, because the unconscious mind, of course, is the language of symbols and metaphor, so it's looking for ways in which you are telling it, I am interested, and one of the ways is by paying close attention to any dream you remember. And another way is, and I'm sure you've all heard this a million times before, but I'm going to tell it as a really important aspect, keep a notebook beside your bed. And the moment you wake up and you have even the vaguest sense of a dream, just write a few notes. Even if it's just, oh, I almost remember. What it does is it signals to the unconscious mind that you are truly taking this process as a very important process in your life. You know, the Australian Kalahari Bushmen, they believe that dreaming is more real than your waking life. And they feel that you dream your life into existence. So what we want to do is we want to really engage our unconsciousness, and one of the ways to that is the unconscious and through the dream. And I think it was Freud that said the royal road to the unconscious is through the dream, or something like that. I don't know. It's been a long time since I studied Freud, but that just popped into my mind. So what we want to do is train our mind to remember our dreams. Taking the notebook helps. And when we do remember them, think about them. Pay attention to the symbols. Write them down. Thank your unconscious for sending you such a rich dream. And say, please send me more. It sounds kind of silly, but believe me, this works. And your unconscious mind begins to sit up and listen and go, oh, she wants more of this, or he wants more of this. I will do more then. You can also even say, and I would like more unconscious moments to become aware of during the day. And you will find yourself thinking and perceiving more symbols and metaphors than you have ever perceived and thought of before. So what you really want to do is engage in a dialogue, a genuine dialogue with your unconscious.
So Cindy, do I understand correctly, the purpose of remembering dreams is really to start to get in touch with your unconscious mind so you build a working relationship. Then when it comes to want to manifest more creativity in your life, it is already there, this connection of naturally understanding and being able to not command, but ask for some insights. Is that correct?
Yes, and in a way, you are more able to command the more you create the relationship with your unconscious, because at a certain point, you can say to your mind before you go to bed, I would like to get some help with this specific issue. I would like to have a dream that will help me to grow and transform. I would like a dream that will help me decide this, or and then there, at a higher level even, you get lucid dreaming, where you can go in and while you're in an unconscious dreaming state, your conscious mind can go in and actually interact, but you're still inside the dream. That's lucid dreaming, right?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's actually very powerful.
Pardon?
That's very powerful. It's basically the foundation that you're building for a whole new world or new way to interact with yourself and use your time also. That's
That's right. It's a whole new way to interact, and the dream is, it's not just to make a relationship with your unconscious mind, although that's a really huge part of it. Your dreams are literally integrating information that you've learned, and it's also giving you, let's see, how do I say this? It's almost like giving you symbols and metaphors for things that you perhaps need to know that you don't really know about yourself or about your world or about the decisions that you're making. So your unconscious mind is actually giving you ideas about how to live better, how to live more creatively, and it kind of gives you a snapshot of your existential life at that moment. In the language of dreams, the language of the unconscious. So you get symbols, you get metaphors. So for example, the other night, I was driving around in a four-wheel, like ATV, all-terrain vehicle, over like huge bumps and lumps, and it was like really hard driving, but I was going places. And in fact, that's what was happening through my week. It was a really hard week. There was lots going on, and it felt really difficult, but I was getting through it. And so you want to learn your personal metaphors and symbols. You know, there's always those metaphor and dream books. You know, oh, well, if you dream about a snake, you're dreaming about sex, you know, all that. We have our personal, unique way of understanding symbols and metaphors. There is some generalizing, but it's very, very personal too. Did that answer your question?
I mean, yes, that more than answers the question. It's just opening up a whole new world of possibilities you can do and work with yourself and stuff. But probably going beyond the scope of what we're doing here right now. But I like the idea for using it to stimulate the creativity. It's really neat.
So basically, if you want to increase your creativity and you want to work on your mental flexibility, you want to look at things that hinder your creative flow, and you want to develop your ability to communicate more and more with your unconscious. And when you can do those things, then you're really beginning to release all the very natural creativity that will just easily and effortlessly emerge from you. And so I'm ready for questions.
All right, perfect. Wow, that was pretty something. So, guys, if you have any questions, you can now put it into the chat box. I will check it, and Cindy will be able to answer them to her best abilities. It was a lot of information that you have given us, Cindy, so thank you already for that. It's been very useful also for me. And just to make sure I've correctly understood it, first of all, we basically realize that we have this inherent capability of creativity in each moment in us. And then we have looked at like certain things like critical voice, the stress factor, that is basically prohibiting this kind of things. And we've looked at how we can create mental flexibility by doing this exercise. And also with the dreams. Those are all the different parts that we have covered, right? To start developing the creativity, and probably also if that's really a desire to actually take the time each day. I think that's probably also the important thing, that you create this space, as you mentioned in the beginning, have this space to create. Is that correct?
Yes, good job. Yeah, the two really key things are that creativity is absolutely inherently natural in each of us, and we are wildly creative. All you have to do is think of your dreams to really, you just know it. We're wildly creative. And the second thing is that we really do need to create the space of contemplation where creativity and the unconscious lives.
Okay, I will check if there are any questions. So far there's nothing. I'll just give you a few more minutes, and otherwise we'll just wrap up this call.
Great. And obviously it's a subject that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, I can tell. And it's, I mean, it's a great part. You know, the creativity, we haven't really covered or talked about it, but it's pretty obvious that, you know, the creativity is something that can really enhance your life. If you're living creatively and also thinking about your life creatively, you see new ways to manifest yourself or your world around you. So I think it's actually a vital skill for happiness too.
Absolutely. And you know, there's other really simple things that you can do to increase your mental flexibility, like if you're right hand dominant, use your left hand a little bit more each day. If you have a route that you take to work or to your friend's house or, you know, to the grocery store, and you always take the same route, change your route every now and again. So it's just like taking your mind out of those grooves and ruts that end up making the mind just a little bit more inflexible in different ways. What else? Oh, if you always wake up on the right side of the bed and get out on the right side, get out on the left side. If you always sleep on the right side, sleep on the left side. Little things that become habitual, just change them up a little bit. And our neurology changes. Our neural networks actually build new networks in those very simple things. And that can only be a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. Also, what I used to do sometimes is, read the newspaper backwards, so basically, flip it around so it's on its head and try to... It's not that, to be honest. And also, one thing, maybe when it comes to writing, I read this from Milton Erickson, that he start at the end of the book and read the last chapter and then try to guess the previous chapter, make assumptions, try to guess it, and then you go read it, and then again you make assumptions for the next chapter. So you basically read the whole novel backwards. So I mean, there are endless ways that we can engage.
That's right. There are endless ways, endless creative ways.
All right.
And that's really all creativity is.
Perfect. So I got a question here from Tatiana. First of all, she says, thank you for the very insightful seminar. Question, meditation is the process of observing the breathing, for example, and just letting the thoughts go by and to calm down. In Create Space exercise, you suggest to pay attention to the thoughts which are signals of subconscious. What is the relationship between these two practices?
Interesting question. Hi, Tatiana. Thank you. There is a kind of relationship, it's just that you're doing something slightly different. So in the one practice, you're allowing your thoughts to be. So you're not pushing them away. This is in the meditative practice. You're not pushing your thoughts away. You're allowing your thoughts to be. You're observing them. You're witnessing them. And you're really, as you get deeper into the meditative experience of allowing your thoughts to be there, you are looking for, or you're not actually looking for, but you can begin to see the moment the thought appears. And it's not getting involved in the thoughts. It's like having a thought as a guest in your house that you're not paying any attention to, but they're there. And where I'm giving you an exercise to, I think you're thinking about the first exercise, which is a kind of meditative exercise. Actually, it's not as different as I thought it was. It's really allowing your thought to be there and paying attention to the moment it forms. So in meditation, you may not spend so much time actually getting involved in the thought, and it depends what kind of meditation you're doing, because a concentration meditation may pay more attention to that at certain times and at certain stages of meditation. Whereas if you are allowing the space and you're paying attention to your thoughts for creativity, you are actually paying attention to what's emerging and what are the emotions that are emerging, because if you're wanting to be an artist, you're looking always to evoke an emotion in your audience. So you want to understand and evoke the emotion in yourself first, and then the emotion is evoked in the audience of them. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but
yeah. No, I think if I understand correctly, the practice itself is very similar, but the focus is slightly different. That the focus on the exercise you suggested is to realize the inherent capability of each thought being actually very creative and actually being able to stimulate emotions, right? For example,
yeah.
You said the critical voice that says, oh, you can't do this, and all the creative ways that you neglect something or take something away from you. So there is this inherent capability in each moment, and maybe, if I understand correctly, it is through this practice that you can realize that you actually have it.
Yeah, There's paying attention to the thought of the critical voice is quite a different exercise, and it has nothing to do with meditation. And I'm not sure that that's what Tatiana's talking about.
Oh, no, no.
I think it's the first exercise of paying attention to the moment thought is formed. And it's really not that different to a Buddhist meditation. I think what happens is we often misunderstand what people mean by not paying attention to the thoughts and in meditation. And a lot of people believe that the idea of meditation is to push away the thoughts. And in fact, the idea is to allow the thoughts, to see the thoughts, to not push the thoughts away. And eventually, as you allow those thoughts to be, you have a different relationship with them. And eventually, the thoughts become more clear, less scattery noise. And each thought becomes a little bit more crystallized without having a distorting and disturbing effect on the life.
Okay, perfect. So this was the only question that was around. Thank you very much for asking, Tatiana and Sergey. I don't know which one actually asked the question. But with that, I think we'll come to an end. Do you have anything that you want to say before we wrap it up, Cindy?
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this.
Yeah, okay. And thank you very much for sharing your knowledge that you have accumulated. For me, it was very, very insightful. I definitely will use some of those practices for myself, so I'm very happy that I was able to hear from you. And we'll be holding future webinars too with Cindy again, probably, and maybe also other speakers. So look forward to other things that come up. And if you have any ideas or suggestions of topics you want to have covered, just let me know on the Meetup page or in the comment box, and I can check it, and then we can create another exciting little hour together. So I wish everyone a good Sunday evening, or whenever you're watching this, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.